On an apparently ordinary day, a waitress was preparing for another work shift in a small and cozy cafe in the suburbs. The atmosphere was calm, with few customers circulating, and nothing seemed to indicate that this day would stand out from the others. Until, in an unexpected moment, a young man entered the cafe. With a calm and discreet demeanor, he settled at one of the farthest tables, almost as if he wanted to avoid gazes or attention. This was a common scene, but there was something different about him. It was Barron Trump, the youngest son of the former President of the United States, Donald Trump. To the waitress, however, he was just another customer, and her focus remained on providing good service. She had no idea that this encounter would change her life and be widely discussed across the country. What seemed to be just another routine service quickly turned into a moment filled with emotion. After finishing his meal, Barron left something on the table before leaving quietly. A carefully handwritten note and a tip that, when found, made her stop. The message, simple but profoundly meaningful, touched her heart directly. Not only that, it triggered a reaction that would echo far beyond the walls of that cafe. The aroma of espresso mixed with the sweet scent of freshly baked pastries still lingered in the air, creating a comforting atmosphere, although the cafe's energy was almost apathetic. The afternoon dragged on lazily, and the murmur of casual conversations had transformed into a silence interrupted only by the occasional clinking of cutlery and the muffled sound of background music. For Dana, every minute felt like a small eternity. The clock on the wall advanced with an almost cruel slowness, and every movement she made, no matter how simple, felt heavier than usual. Dana was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Tension was palpable in her shoulders as she cleaned the same table near the window for the third time. An attempt to distract herself from thoughts that chased her like shadows. Her phone, frequently checked, was full of unread notifications, most of them reminders of overdue bills. Rent was approaching, and the last tip she received wouldn't even be enough to pay half. The day so far had been disappointing, with customers barely looking up from their phones to thank for the service, leaving only change on the tables. Taking a deep breath, Dana adjusted her ponytail, tightening it as if trying to reaffirm a last vestige of control. Her manager, a woman with a tired but firm gaze, gave her a look that, even without words, seemed to say, "Hang in there. Almost there." But Dana was already on autopilot. Her thoughts were a mix of anxiety and resignation when the sound of the cafe doorbell unexpectedly echoed through the environment, pulling her from her automatic trance. Looking up, Dana noticed a tall and thin young man entering the cafe. He had a striking presence, even dressed simply, in a casual shirt and pants that somehow seemed elegant in his posture. Two discreet men followed him closely, their movements almost imperceptible, like shadows blending into the environment. It wasn't common to see someone confident in that cafe. After all, the place was known more for its welcoming atmosphere than for being frequented by important people. For a brief moment, Dana was paralyzed, her pen hovering over her notepad. Something about that young man seemed familiar, but she couldn't immediately identify him. It was only when he settled at the farthest table in the corner near the window that everything made sense. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Barron Trump, the youngest son of the former President of the United States. She felt the pressure increase but quickly remembered her training. He was just another customer, like any other. Adjusting her apron, she walked up to him with a professional smile on her face. "Good afternoon, what can I get for you today?" she asked, striving to sound calm and natural. Barron looked up, and for a moment, Dana found herself captivated by his serene and almost introspective expression. He seemed so different from the images portrayed in the news over the years. "A cappuccino and maybe a croissant, please," he replied with a polite but restrained voice, conveying unexpected kindness. Dana noted the order and responded in the same professional tone. "Certainly. Anything else?" He shook his head gently. "That's all, thank you." As she returned to the counter to prepare the order, she noticed her hands trembling slightly. Trying to disguise the sudden wave of nervousness, she focused on the steam escaping from the cappuccino machine. It was just a customer, she told herself, but there was something in the interaction that made her uneasy. Whenever she could, her gaze averted to the table where Barron was sitting. He seemed comfortable, but unlike most customers who were buried in their phones or laptops, he just looked out the window, lost in thought. When the cappuccino and croissant were ready, Dana took the tray and walked to the table, balancing it carefully. "Here you are," she said as she placed the items in front of him. Barron looked up again and gave a slight smile. "Thank you," he replied, with a simplicity that carried a tone of genuine gratitude. As she walked away, Dana couldn't ignore the persistent feeling that something more was happening there. That young man, so reserved and serene, seemed out of place in the surrounding environment. With each passing minute, her curiosity grew, and the energy in the air felt almost palpable. She busied herself cleaning other tables, but her eyes, almost on their own, kept returning to that corner where Barron remained, motionless, absorbed in his own thoughts. Then, at the end of his meal, he did something that caught Dana's attention. He took a pen from his pocket and began to write on the receipt. His movements were quick and precise, as if he was determined to finish before anyone noticed. He carefully folded the paper and placed it under the empty cup before standing up, grabbing his phone and coat. As he passed by Dana, he gave her one last look and a discreet smile. "Have a good day," he said, with the same kindness as before. Dana stood still for a moment, watching him exit through the door with the two men following shortly behind. The bell rang again, marking his departure, and the cafe returned to its usual calmness. She took a deep breath and walked to the table to clean. But when she picked up the folded receipt, she felt the unexpected weight of the paper in her hand. As she unfolded it, her eyes widened, and she could barely contain the sigh of surprise that escaped her lips. "Are you okay?" the manager asked, leaning in to look at Dana closely. She hesitated for a moment, still feeling the weight of the folded paper in her hand. "Yes, I'm fine. Just a tip. Very generous," she replied, her voice still trembling. The manager raised an eyebrow, clearly suspicious. "Generous enough to make you cry?" Dana nervously laughed and handed over the receipt. When the manager unfolded the paper, his jaw dropped. A low whistle escaped as his eye scanned the numbers and the note. "I can't believe it. Who was sitting at that corner table?" Dana took a deep breath before responding. It was Barron Trump. The manager's eyes widened. "Are you serious? Barron Trump? He left this here?" "Yes," Dana confirmed with a nod, pulling the handwritten note from her pocket as if it were a precious object. "But it's not just the money," she added, handing the note to the manager, who took it carefully, almost reverently. The words seemed to have an immediate impact. The manager, who rarely showed emotions beyond hardened professionalism, let out an impressed whisper. "This is something else. Really is." Dana nodded slowly, folding the note again carefully. "I don't even know why he wrote this. I was just doing my job, as always." The manager looked at her with an expression that mixed understanding and compassion. "Sometimes people see beyond what we show, Dana. Maybe he noticed that you're going through tough times, even if you don't say anything. You always treat everyone well, even customers who don't deserve it. That's rare. Maybe he noticed." Dana felt a lump in her throat as she listened. She hadn't realized how much she needed words like those. For months, she had been struggling to keep everything in order, working long shifts, saving on every meal to pay the rent, and still helping her mother with the bills. She was kind because that was her essence, what kept her going. But knowing that someone had noticed that, someone like Barron Trump, was overwhelmingly emotional. The murmur in the cafe grew as other employees began to whisper, exchanging curious glances and gestures toward the table where Barron had sat. One of the baristas with wide eyes of excitement approached. "Did you really serve him? What did he say? Was he nice?" Dana smiled slightly, trying to keep the situation under control. "Yes, he was very polite, a really calm guy." "That's so surreal," said the barista, nervously laughing. "I would freak out if it were me." Dana just nodded, choosing not to mention the note or the tip. She felt that sharing that intimate moment would expose it in a way that didn't seem right. For now, that was a personal treasure she wanted to keep to herself. The following hours passed quickly, although each task was routine, cleaning tables, serving coffees, interacting with customers. Something seemed different. The usual weight on her shoulders was a little lighter, as if Barron's words had planted a spark of hope in her. When she finally took off her apron and prepared to go home, the folded note remained carefully tucked in her pocket. On the way to the subway station, Dana couldn't help but take the paper out of her pocket and reread the words. They echoed in her mind. My family has been where you are. Stay strong. Better days will come. She murmured the phrase softly, almost like a prayer. He didn't have to do this, she thought. He didn't have to care. But he cared. In the subway car, as the train moved through the dark tunnels, Dana closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, felt a small spark of hope. She had no idea that that simple gesture was about to become much bigger than she could imagine. The next morning, she was awakened by the insistent sound of her phone vibrating beside her bed. Dana groaned, still half asleep, and reached out to grab the device. The screen was full of notifications, dozens of messages, alerts, and mentions on social media. What's happening? She murmured, trying to process the flood of information. One specific message caught her attention, containing a link to a headline. Barron Trump leaves heartwarming note for Waitress, Internet reacts. Dana clicked on the link with her heart racing. There was her story, reproduced in detail. The handwritten note, the act of kindness, and even the tip were featured on news websites and social media. Comments from strangers flooded the internet, praising both Barron and Dana. This is incredible, one said. The world needs more stories like this. Another said, this note is a lesson in empathy. Small gestures make all the difference. Dana dropped the phone, feeling overwhelmed. Her story, which initially seemed like a private and meaningful moment, now belonged to the world. Amid the chaos that seemed to spin around her, Dana found a small glimmer of hope. The situation was no longer just about her. It was about something bigger, about the power of small acts of kindness that could deeply resonate in people's lives. But even so, a difficult choice still loomed over her, a decision that could determine how her story would end. When her shift finally came to an end, the cafe felt smaller than ever, almost suffocating under the weight of the attention it was receiving. With a heavy sigh, Dana chose to exit through the back door, carefully avoiding the news crew that was still camped out at the main entrance. The cool night air seemed to ease some of the tension in her shoulders, but the silent streets felt different, as if the world had slightly shifted its place. Walking home, Dana held her bag tightly. The note was carefully stored inside, like a precious treasure. Her phone buzzed with another message. Dana, they want you on the morning TV show. Call me. It was her agent. Dana stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, thoughts racing in her mind. The idea of appearing on television made her nervous. She didn't want to expose herself, have her face on screens, judged by strangers. But at the same time, a small inner voice told her that she had the chance to convey something important, that kindness still matters, that small gestures could transform lives. After a long moment, Dana put the phone back in her bag. She would decide later at home. Upon entering her apartment, she found her mother sitting in the recliner, flipping through the television channels with the remote control. Suddenly, a familiar voice caught her attention. A simple note left by Barron Trump for a hard-working waitress is moving the nation. Dana froze at the door. On the screen, a blurred photo showed the receipt and the note, accompanied by the headline, A Silent Act of Generosity Sparks National Debate. Dana's mother looked at her with a spark of recognition in her eyes. It's you, isn't it? Dana sighed, dropping her bag on the floor. Yes, Mom, it's me. Her mother motioned for her to sit beside her. It's something good, dear. People need stories like this. Dana crossed her arms, a mix of exhaustion and frustration reflected in her expression. I didn't ask for this, Mom. I don't want to be the center of attention. Sometimes good things find you when you're not looking for them, her mother replied tenderly, holding Dana's hand. Dana looked down, feeling a lump in her throat. It feels too big for me, like I don't deserve it. Her mother shook her head slowly. Don't say that. You work hard every day, even when you're exhausted. You're kind, even when the world seems indifferent. That's rare, Dana. And someone noticed that. Someone decided to remind you that you're important. The words penetrated deeply. Dana felt her eyes fill with tears, but this time she didn't try to hold them back. The note wasn't just about her, she realized. It was about hope. It was about showing that even in difficult times, kindness still had room to flourish. That night, lying in her bed, Dana held the note under her pillow as if it were an amulet. The phone incessantly rang beside her, but she paid it no attention. She closed her eyes and, for the first time in a long while, felt real comfort. Someone had seen her. She was not invisible. The next day, Dana made a decision. She picked up the phone and called her agent. "I'm going to do the interview," she said calmly. The response on the other end was a surprise. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Dana replied firmly. "But I'm not going to talk about money. I want to talk about the note, about what it means. That's all." The interview was simple but charged with emotion. Sitting on an elegant sofa with her hands folded in her lap, Dana calmly answered the host's questions. "Dana," he began, "you've been in the spotlight for something very unexpected. Can you tell us how you felt when you first read the note?" Dana took a deep breath before responding. "Honestly, I was surprised. It wasn't the money, it was what he wrote. I was going through a tough time, and those words meant more than I can explain." The host nodded, reciting the note. "Your kindness and hard work do not go unnoticed. My family has been where you are. Stay strong, better days will come." He then asked, "What do you think he meant by that?" Dana looked directly into the camera, feeling connected to everyone watching. "I think he meant that we all face struggles no matter who we are or where we come from. Sometimes, in the worst moments, the smallest act of kindness can change everything. It reminds us that someone sees us, that we are not alone." The silence that followed was almost reverent. The host smiled warmly and asked, "Is there anything you would like to say to Barron Trump?" Dana's voice trembled a bit, but she smiled. "I just want to thank him, not for the money, but for seeing me, for reminding me to keep hope. He made more of a difference than he realizes." When the interview aired, Dana avoided looking at her phone. She didn't check the comments or the headlines. Instead, she returned to work the next day feeling a little lighter. The cafe was busier than ever, and customers treated her differently, with genuine smiles and evident gratitude. Some even left kind notes on napkins, small reminders that her story had touched lives. Barron Trump's note remained carefully stored in her wallet for the following years, as a symbol that small gestures could indeed change the world.